Let's talk a little bit about point-slope form. In my opinion, writing an equation of a line in point-slope form is the best way to do it. I know that you guys all love slope-intercept form, and yes, slope-intercept form does make graphing easy, all right? But point-slope form is very, very, very simple. The point-slope form for the equation of a line with slope m passing through the point x1, y1 is given by y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. Now, the reason that I always say that point-slope form is the best way to write an equation of a line is that in order to write the equation of any line, you must have two pieces of information. And those two pieces of information are a point and a slope. All right? If you have to have a point and a slope, it only makes sense that you should write the equation of that line using point-slope form. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if I have a y-intercept? Well, y-intercept is actually a point, right? You know that the x-coordinate of any y-intercept is going to be 0, right? So that's going to be 0, comma, whatever the y value or y-intercept is going to be, right? A y-intercept is just a point written in a different form sometimes. So you need a point, you need a slope. Write the equation of your line in point-slope form. Let's try an example here. Write the equation of a line passing through 3/4, 3/2, and -4/3, 7/4. Well, as we just said, in order to write the equation of any line, you must have a point and you must have slope. Now, the good news is that we actually have 2 points. The bad news is that we don't have our slope. But as you might recall from earlier on, okay, we can find the slope by taking the change in y and dividing by the change in x. That is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. In this particular case, we have 7/4 minus 3/2 divided by -4/3 minus 3/4. Well, in order to simplify those fractions or subtract those fractions in the numerator and the denominator, we are going to have to get a common denominator first. My least common denominator in the numerator is going to be 4. I'll have to multiply that second fraction by 2/2. And in the denominator, my least common denominator is going to be 12. I'll have to multiply that first fraction in the denominator by 4/4 and the second fraction in the denominator by 3/3. Doing so gives us 7/4 minus 6/4 up on top, divided by -16/12 minus 9/12. Now that we have a common denominator, we can subtract the fractions. All we have to do is subtract the numerators. 7 minus 6 gives me 1/4 in the numerator. -16 minus 9 gives me -25/12 in the denominator. All right, so we're not completely simplified yet. I have a fraction divided by another fraction. And when we divide by a fraction, the easiest way to divide by a fraction is to multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction. We're going to take that denominator, -25/12, and we are going to flip it and change the division into multiplication. This is 1/4 times -12/25. Now to multiply the fractions, we just go straight across. 1 times -12 gives me -12. 4 times 25 is going to give me 100. Simplifying that down, we are going to end up with -3/25. Now, one thing that you might also want to consider when you are trying to simplify these fractions is that you can simplify before multiplying. Notice that we have this 12 in the numerator of the second fraction and a 4 in the numerator of the first fraction. What you can do is take 12 and divide it by 4. 12 divided by 4 leaves you with a 3 in the numerator. Right? So we can actually simplify that as we are going along. All right. Now we have the slope. We can pick either point that we want to write our equation of our line. Using the first point and plugging it in, we end up with y minus 3/2 is equal to -3/25 times x minus 3/4 times the quantity x minus 3/4. Or we could use our other point, y minus 7 over 4 is equal to negative 3 over 25 times the quantity x plus 4 thirds. Both of these equations, while they look different, are actually the exact same line. And if you weren't sure, you could check your work by graphing them and plugging them into your calculator. Now, in order to plug them into your calculator, you would have to isolate y, just meaning that for the first equation, you would have to add 3 halves to each side, and for the second equation, you would have to add 7/4 to each side. Parallel lines. Two lines are said to be parallel if they have the same slope. M1 is equal to M2. Here I've shown a green line where the slope is equal to 5/3. That means that any parallel line is going to have the exact same slope of 5/3. Another thing that is important is that parallel lines will never intersect. Right? Here I have a second line. They have the exact same slope. They are never going to cross. Two lines are said to be perpendicular, however, if their slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. M1 is equal to negative 1 divided by M2. Perpendicular slopes are going to intersect at 90-degree angles. To find a perpendicular slope, you will take the slope that you are starting with, you will multiply it by negative 1, and flip it. Right? That's what it means to be the negative reciprocal or opposite reciprocal. If we multiply 5/3 by negative 1 and flip it, we end up with negative 3/5. All right? M perpendicular is equal to negative 3/5. Notice that they intersect and create 90-degree angles. Okay, find the equations of the lines that pass through the point negative 4, 1 and are parallel and perpendicular to the line 5x minus 3y is equal to 8. So we have two parts to this problem. We have to find a parallel line and we have to find a perpendicular line. And in order to write an equation of a line, there are two pieces of information that we have to have. What are they? A point and a slope. Now we know the point that each of these lines has to go through. That's negative 4, 1. We have to find the slope. Well, we know the slope has the same slope as the line 5x minus 3y is equal to 8. So how can we find the slope of that line? Well, the easiest way is probably to rewrite the equation of that line in slope-intercept form. All right? Now we're going to write our final answers in point-slope form, but in order to find the slope, we need to rewrite 5x minus 3y is equal to 8 in slope-intercept form. Okay. To do that, we take 5x minus 3y equals 8, and we need to isolate y. The first step would be to subtract 5. Subtracting 5 gives me negative 3y is equal to negative 5x plus 8. If you wrote it as 8 minus 5x, that's perfectly acceptable as well. And finally, to solve for y, we would have to divide everything we see on both sides of the equation by negative 3. Doing so gives me y is equal to 5/3 x minus 8 divided by 3. Notice that dividing by the negative, right, we have negative 5 divided by negative 3 leaves me with a positive 5/3, and dividing positive 8 by negative 3 leaves you with a negative 8/3. Now that we have written the equation of our given line in slope-intercept form, we know that the slope is 5/3. That means that the slope of my parallel line is also going to be 5/3. So we have our slope, we have our point of negative 4, 1. The best way to write an equation of a line is point-slope form. This leaves us with y minus 1 equals 5/3 times the quantity x plus 4. For our perpendicular line, we know that the slopes are negative reciprocals or opposite reciprocals. The opposite reciprocal of 5/3 is negative 3/5. Again, I take my slope, I multiply it by negative 1, and I flip it. Okay, 1 divided by negative 5/3 gives us negative 3/5, as we said, the opposite reciprocal. Now that we have the slope of the perpendicular line, we still know that it has to go through the point negative 4, 1. That leaves us with our final answer, y minus 1 equals negative 3/5 times x plus 4. There we have our parallel line and our perpendicular line. We could check our work graphically by plotting all three of these. Okay, here in black, we have the line 5x minus 3y is equal to 8. That was the given line. All right, in blue, we have our parallel line, y minus 1 equals 5/3 times the quantity x plus 4. Make note, again, those two lines are never going to intersect. And then we have our perpendicular line, y minus 1 equals negative 3/5 x plus 4. Now you might be wondering, am I going to accept lines written in point slope form as a final answer? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. I absolutely love point slope form. It is actually my preferred method for writing an equation of a line.